Thank you for joining us today on the Desert Sanctuary podcast.
Remember, all who wander in the desert are not lost.
We believe all of our stories are sacred.
We are always here if you need someone to hear your story.
Check out our blog on Pathos and also our YouTube channel.
And stay tuned for our Leaning Forward conference.
Remember, we love you.
And be at peace.
Hi, welcome to the Desert Sanctuary podcast. I'm Karl Forehand. I'm here with Karl Forehand, and we have a very special guest, a brand new friend to both of us, JoBeth Roberts, and she is a spiritual entrepreneur. She's a lifelong seeker, mom, hairstylist, podcaster, and fitness instructor who's naturally inclined towards optimism. She started sharing her relational travels in 2023 on her podcast, JoBeth on the Journey. She gains inspiration for forward motion by stories that are empathetic fuel during these times. JoBeth knows love binds us all, and she can get you to hold that reality also. She powerfully understands now is the time to spread your wings, tell our stories, and let connection be formed for good. Welcome to the Desert Sanctuary podcast, JoBeth. We are so glad to meet you, and we're glad that you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a privilege to sit here with two warm, kind, powerful faces.
Well, thank you.
We're excited about that. My face doesn't feel very powerful. I just came back from the dentist. I'm drooling and kind of numb still. So I'm going to do my best, but Laura always fills in the gaps pretty well. But JoBeth, we think stories are really important. In fact, we think they're sacred. And so we're thankful for you trusting us with your story and that you would feel safe here, as you mentioned before we started recording. And we just would like to hear your story. We'll kind of build from that in whatever detail you want to talk. The microphone's yours.
Yeah, well, thank you. I thought long and hard about what I would like to share today. And it's been quite a journey back towards peace and love. I think to really tell the whole story, I need to start in childhood. I come from a family, I would say pretty opposite on both sides of the family. Faith was always a part of my life. And I learned early on that faith was a feeling. My parents took me, mainly my dad, I remember, to a church, community Christian church, where there was a pastor named Pastor Buddy. And love is a feeling, and he was a feeling. So I have lots of reason to be probably bitter or angry or real pessimistic after I've weathered the past few years. But today, sitting with you is for the little girl who went to that church, who understood that love is what binds us all. Mm-hmm. So just thank you. My dad, I remember him having faith be very real and very tangible and not covered with legalism. So where my dad took me to that church, where Pastor Buddy actually had, from what I understand, like a moment in his late 40s where he decided that he needed to use his life for good. And so community church was a special place. I actually went to school there also. And my dad was a real people connector. I kind of joke about this, but he was also an Amway guy. So my dad errs on the side of joy. He is a glass half full kind of guy. He never meets a stranger. It's a little bit ridiculous how friendly he is. But whenever he sees people, he really sees people. So I think that's something I really wanted to say today, is that my journey with my dad has evolved. But at the core of what I learned early on is that love is a feeling. And that when you really shake hands with people, you really see them. in their eye. And we've had numerous conversations over the past few years where I have to like remind him, I'm like, Dad, you took me to the part of town that nobody went to, quote unquote. No white people did. Okay. And that's rare, Dad. Like, I think he and I both get gripped, not understanding the ways of some people because we're covered in empathy. And so, yeah, I mean, I got a good understanding of what love was. Um, the other side of the family had a lot of emotional instability, I think is what I'd like to say, covered with a lot of legalism and a lot of spiritual bypassing, lots of chaos. So as I was growing up, lots of stability. I'm wearing my grandmother's necklace today. Nancy Roberts is my dad's mom, and both of them were just service and love and Christianity in motion. And so I'm so grateful to have seen that, because in high school and, I took myself to a very conservative Southern Baptist church. And thankfully I get to heal from that now. But I saw a lot there and I learned a lot there. And I think as I keep the focus of the good parts of that, it brought me my best friend Sabrina, which I talk a lot about on the podcast. She's a biblical studies major and she's a psychology major from the University of Florida. And so she has been the rope that has kind of kept me tethered to what is true about me. So I went to Orlando, this small town girl from North Florida, with all of these set beliefs of how everything is and who is good and who is not good. And heaven forbid you be something other than a certain political affiliation. They can't be good. Just lots of things. A friend recently sent me a spiritual book from her faith as I'm learning about her faith. And when I got it from the mail, I held it and I said, this isn't scary. So definitely got a good dose of fear about everything I was, everything about my body, which paired very nicely with an eating disorder. Got a whole healthy dose. And here I am in Orlando, where I go to beauty school, and lo and behold, Sabrina is there in Orlando also. And we walk a bunch of roads and in a church that we were told about through a mutual friend. A friend of ours was babysitting for a family, and they said, hey, go to this church. So we did. And more fear and lots of good, though, I will say. Lifelong friendships there. And that took me to the really first place where I think my deconstruction started, if I'm being very honest. And that was, I was a hairdresser among college friends. So here I am, like busted out of school and into the workforce while everybody's in college. And there was an opportunity for 2 college students to go to New York City for the summer. And I'm the kind of person where if something feels like it's a draw, then I'm gonna go there. And I think now on my journey, I can just hold those as like nuggets of gold because they've all taught me something. I was right. I needed to go there and I needed to work with my friend for the summer and help paint public schools for free and serve in that church. And I think on the podcast, I've spoken about something else being the first real turning point in my deconstruction journey. But I think New York was it, because I remember going up there, and even though that church was closely affiliated to the one in Orlando, there were Jewish people, there were Catholic people, lives were being quote unquote changed, and there wasn't the protocol of the churches I had been in the past like 5 years. So you kind of couldn't unsee that. And I think I really fell in love with New Yorkers then. I couldn't shake how hard they work and how grateful they are, and that it wasn't fitting in the box of what I had seen in the South, right? Mm-hmm. And so that really did start that journey.
Laura's a New Yorker.
Yeah, upstate New York.
I love all of you.
Upstate New York. Yeah.
So, it's really weird because I remember a phone call and what I was wearing outside of the church when I took a phone call from my then boyfriend, who later became my husband. And I remember that there were lots of questions in our friend group. And I remember there was a tone in the voice on the phone, and the pastor at the church back in Florida had preached against a Donald Miller book, Blue Like Jazz. And I don't even know where Donald Miller is now, but at the time, the reasoning, I believe truly, that the pastor preached against the book was because they were about to build a multi-million-dollar church right next to a very poor area. And so I just think in our circle of friends, the BS meter just started to rise. Like, what are we doing here? And so I literally remember thinking, wow, he may never go to church again. And that's pretty much what happened. So I keep on my path, and I get married and have 2 babies, and was hairdresser for a little bit. And then right before I had my daughter, I became a stay-at-home mom, and just very much on the journey, doing all the things, checking all the boxes, really grateful. Complete peace whenever I married my ex-husband. Like, I remember knowing that it was where I was supposed to be. It was who I was supposed to marry. It was all the things. And so I think I want to fast forward to, I had a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old. So I had babies back to back. And there was one day in particular where, I'm asking questions, but I'm still taking them to church. And one day my daughter is wearing a Dora the Explorer dress, and it is tattered. Oh my goodness. It's tattered because she wears it every day. She hardly has any hair. We're waiting for her to get hair because I'm a hairdresser. Like, we're waiting. And I remember her singing a song about Jesus. And I turned towards her and I said, what does Daddy say whenever you sing songs about Jesus? Because at that point, like, I was going to church all by myself, and there was, I would say, a dose of healthy skepticism and science from my kid's dad. Like, I owe him a lot of critical thinking. I owe him a lot of pointing me in the direction of how things move. Like, he gave me my kids all the things, but in that moment, I remember still feeling very like, we're doing this and this feels weird. And I wish I had somebody going to church with me, all the things. And here you are singing about Jesus. And when I asked her that question, she turned towards me and I felt like the world stopped. And she said, God is in my heart and therefore I sing. And in that moment, I felt like she volleyed fear back to me. And I said, okay. And it shook me a little bit, because here she is. She's not at the age of accountability. She's not 5. She's full of life, and she's full of goodness, and she's full of intuition, really. And she said, in so many words, in her little spirit, she said, that's yours. You take it. That ain't mine. I'm fine. God's in my heart and I sing. And I thought, that's interesting. So maybe I should question some things, like, because that's true. And it doesn't matter what song you're singing, it's in your heart and you sing it. So that really started some things for me. And then it was a self-help kind of journey. I feel a lot of peace today in my heart and a lot of freedom because I'm finally at peace in a lot of ways with healthy boundaries and family. So that path took me to therapy. And we actually moved from Orlando to the Carolinas when the kids were 2 and 3. And the really weird, funny thing is we moved into a camper. And I'm like, I can do it. I can do hard things. I need very little to be happy. We got this. Like, it also changed the course of my life because there was nowhere to hide anymore, right? So I had to make the best of it. And right before we moved into the camper, I wasn't my best self and I was real grumpy. And I had a childhood full of a grumpy mom who didn't take any accountability for her own worthiness or life. And I say that and like, there's a lot of peace there because there's a lot of forgiveness there. So, but I was like, I will not be this kind of mom. And here we are moving to this camper and I'm going to make it good because I'm going to be good. And it's pretty obvious that, I'm alone in a lot of ways. But I can make the grass green under my feet. So that kind of started me on a journey of just letting go of diet culture and really, really looking on the inside. There was a blessing about that time because my friend who invited me to be a part of a fitness challenge group is the most goddess energy, like no big deal, easy breezy. But she also gave me enough grit for me to not quit on myself for 30 days. And the beautiful part is that I had to commit to reading or listening to podcasts or listening to audiobooks for 10 minutes a day. So why that is so pivotal is because when you open your mind to people's stories, then it busts down the gate towards empathy or towards the will to keep going or just basic scientific facts. I mean, my ex-husband handed me the book or showed it to me, The Brain Maker by Dr. Perlmutter. I listened to it in like 2 days and I had 2 tiny babies. So that 10 minutes a day really translated. And what happened is in like 60 days of me being like, JoBeth, you're going to be happy. You're going to find some joy in your days. I started showing up for myself. And so, that really led me down a lot of roads and continued the pattern of deconstruction because my spiritual mentors were no longer my spiritual mentors. And by elaborating, I was gaining so much healing by learning how to eat properly and eat all day, and not deprive myself because that was a huge part of it. I was no longer depriving. I was like 8 years old whenever my aunt and my mom went and got Fin. I started my first diet pill when I was like 10 years old. Like I was like, forget it. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to feed myself well. So 2 people in my life who I considered spiritual mentors went out of their way to warn me. They didn't take me to coffee. They didn't give me a phone call. They just sent me a message and a text that said, you're putting a hashtag on there that your daughter is watching you. And I just want to let you know that she's watching the spiritual. And I just thought, duh. Like big fat duh. Like she's watching it all. And the feeling of love is something you can't shake. And so I just thought like, this is stupid and this is hypocritical. And if I'm being really honest, those 2 women are resentful as hell. And then I can hold space that like those 2 women are also part of the reason why I had an oxygen mask on for a lot of years towards, a little bit of fun and laughter. So that really got me going. Just like but nope. So, okay. I was like, okay, so people want to pray away their things, but, they don't want to do the shit to get free. Okay. Got it. Okay, cool. Well, I'm finding some answer to prayer, if you want to call it that. And what it is really just biology. It's really just intrinsic motivation. It's really just not sitting back and be codependent as hell. Like so many women I've seen, like, oh, so me taking accountability in my life means you need to come out of the woodwork because you feel a type of way about that my jeans are fitting cuter. That's your issue. So that really got me going. Someone put my name in the hat to lead a women's ministry, like Bible study, at mine and the kids' then church here. And they were like, JoBeth's been on a health journey and it's laced with a little bit of Jesus. Let's have her lead that group. And boy, that was a real moment where I was like, I'm out. Just so much.
Do you see that as an attempt to pull you back in?
That was an attempt to exploit something shiny because ain't nobody want to be shiny themselves, is what I think. I think I mean, just so much about it. Like, I could get so pessimistic because I even need to probably back up, because in that group, they kind of just were like, she's got something going on, let's have her lead it. And then we went through this study on like Jericho, and it didn't make sense. And then the conversations were laced with diet culture. They were laced with like just trauma, like it just felt so sad to me. And it felt like I was beating my head against the wall. Like, nobody wants to change. They want to throw out Old Testament Bible verse on it and like make it all go away. And it's like, I see so many toxic things in here. My head is spinning. And then I met my friend Deb Lewis, who actually recently passed. And her and I would just look at each other like across the room and be like, I don't know, I smell some BS around here, And so I think just realizing that like there was also another big component of that is this is before I knew that I would fall in love with the person I'm in love with now. So this is before I even knew being queer would be a possibility for me, literally. There were like different groups. So we had the help group, and there was another group full of just women that are just not nice people. And that's like hard to say, but you know how it goes. It's like the mean girl for God thing, where everything's like perfect and wonderful. And this particular group was reading a Jen Hatmaker book. And the leader of the book was like the youth pastor's wife, and she made it known that she hated women's ministry, but she was here because she had to. And I just thought, what are we doing? And this was literally the weeks where Jen Hatmaker said, I believe queer people can be holy. And so there was a special meeting called, and I didn't even know this happened, where all the leaders were in a meeting, and the pastor came in and there was no conversation about it. He just said, the Jen Hatmaker book is out. And I was like, what did Jen say? Nobody really said anything. They like kind of quietly said, she said gay people can be holy. And it was just like, and then all of a sudden, like, she was out. And I just thought, like, this is just, I don't know. That's just weird. So, yeah, I full on jumped into just learning about people who were questioning the way things had always been done. Mm-hmm. And so that sent me towards Richard Rohr, and that sent me where I felt so much safety and so much freedom to think of Jesus in a different way. I started, listening to the Robcast, Rob Bell. I remember back in the day in my college ministry when everyone loved him because he said God is in the stillness and the silence. I remember that video and that Southern Baptist church, mm-hmm. And then I just was finding so much meaning because that's the kind of person I am. So then that just led me on a journey. I picked up a Brene Brown book, and I'm telling you what, it uncaged my heart. The ability to put words behind the way shame kept me quiet, or kept me submissive, or kept me questioning myself. I was just like pulling at the seam. One of the things that I learned from her books was to use a shitty first draft. Have you guys ever heard of that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And boy, did I, because I was like, oh, you're too quote unquote emotional, JoBeth. So you're going to take all the emotion out of it, queen, and you're going to just write it out and you're going to process. And that's exactly what I did. It was my safe place. So therefore I didn't spew it on my family. So then 2020 hits and I'm holding a green journal, which is kind of crazy because it's the first year I thought 2020 vision. You're 33, JoBeth. And you're going to start to focus on green. We owned a lavender farm and we had a giant garden and I had everything that should quote unquote make somebody happy. We had the quote unquote American dream. But I was like, I am going to have deep roots. Like green is the word. And I don't want any ridiculous tree that can be like blown over. I want deep roots. I want deep roots. Like, and so, yeah, I was like, you're not going to be in the house doing, things. You're going to be out in that field. You're going to be with your family. You're going to be carrying the propane tank that weighs 1,000,000 pounds, while your husband goes and puts the holes in the ground. Like you're going to do it because you're going to figure out what the hell is happening around here. And then 2020 hit. And I think what happened is I read the book Untamed. I also read Michelle Obama's book like a few days before that. And I cried so hard reading Michelle Obama's book.
Mm.
I cried so hard because I was around people who called Barack the Antichrist. I cried so hard because there's so much grit and grace in her story and her parents' story and just their physical struggles. And I just cried in the sunshine. And then I read Untamed. And I had just read Glennon Doyle's other book, Love Warrior. And she asked a very specific question: would you want this for your children? And I said, absolutely not. And so a series of events happened. And I have learned a lot about my intuition in the past few years. I cannot shake the fact. I think it was you guys were talking on a podcast recently about like whenever like you break open the God box, like all awe and wonder just like floods on you. It was happening. It was happening. And like I would need something and the need would be met. I'd be like, whoa, okay, it's time to move. And so it just started me on a journey. I was a stay-at-home mom. I was advised by some people up here to like not get a job because I'd been a stay-at-home mom. And I was like, I got to get a job. I don't have any money. And I don't care how things will shake out. Like I'm capable. I can work. I got a job. And I think that's all I'm going to say about that because that it's just been a very messy, interesting road. However, I got that job at Amazon and it's beautiful because I'm a hairdresser and it was a time in my life where I couldn't talk to people. I could not talk to people. And I was hustling my ass off. I mean, I was working nights. I was only guaranteed 12 hours a week, but I would piece together a schedule and I would do the things and people that I was around were happy. They were hustling. There was one guy there that was like 80 something and he had just moved to the Carolinas because his wife had passed away and he was living with his daughter. And he literally was there to just pass the time. There was a gay lady there that worked the night shift. And, during those times, and we still were questioning, like this, like October, and it was like everybody didn't know really what was happening quite still. And at night, my then friend at the time was like, you're going to cry at the wrap down shift. You're totally going to cry because at that time, people weren't coming together, but we would always huddle and then disperse to make sure everything was where it should be, like for the trucks or for the airplane. And she's like, there's something so beautiful about coming together and then doing it. And I'm like, you're absolutely right. Like, I loved that wrap down shift. And you know, that precious friend of mine that I met, you know, she's now married and they're having a baby. And it was a time where I was like, this matters. I don't give a shit if I have, you know, $300,000 in a 401k. If I am not happy, if my kids don't see happy parents, then this is so, if I have enough, it's okay. You know, and so then a turn of events, I needed to get a daytime job because I was advised to by a guardian ad litem, because I couldn't get childcare. Yeah. Which is kind of crazy because I got a job at a high volume haircutting salon. So this is when just, you know, that the weird pain of life hits the knowing that we're all connected. So here I was doing the work to not fall apart in front of my children. I was making it. I was coming to terms with some information I didn't have that I should have had. That would have made things very different for me. And every single day, I would get a rotation of people that I didn't know. And it's because I was going through so much personally that I was able to not do the bullshit questions that you do in life. I'm not a surface kind of girl. I'm just not. And so I would meet people and like 98, I would say 99% of the time, in a 10-minute haircut, we could find middle ground.
Mhm.
And there's just so many people that I met during that time, which is like salve for maybe the missteps I took. So it changed me and it fueled me because I would take time to journal that morning. One time in particular, I remember I was journaling that morning. And journaling for me was a challenge because it had been used to hurt me. So something I had done for my own well-being was used against me. So for me to pick up and write was so much courage. But one morning I was writing and I remember thinking, like, that poem, Footprints in the Sand, is not about Jesus. It's about Sabrina. Like, she carried me. She never talked ugly about anybody because she knew I was so strong-willed. I wouldn't listen. And, you know, when I would question myself or people around me would enjoy the questioning, she would bring me back to center in a very loving way. We walked a lot of roads, so just a lot of roads. So as I'm writing, I'm like, that was not Jesus in the sand. That was Sabrina. I'm writing it. So then I like go to work and there was this beautiful man named Brian, and he was a widow, come to find out, and he had kind of turned towards fitness to cope with his grief. He actually worked at the Baptist church. Which is just so freaking beautiful, really. And so that day I was like happy to be there, grateful. It was right by Starbucks and all the things. So he sits in my chair, and typically you talk to the like through the mirror at people. And he turned his chair around and he looked at me and he said, "You know that poem, The Footprints in the Sand? That's a good poem." And I just thought, like, I am so sorry that I put God in a box for so long. Or it's not that I have to be sorry about that. Like, I was born knowing that love is God. And I was born knowing that truth. And I'm just so happy to get back to that. The podcast was a driving factor for me for at least 8 years. Because I knew that if I could be a very sad, very lonely stay-at-home mom who was praying and trying and doing all the things, that I could be that source of encouragement to other people, because I have known so many thought-provoking people. So I didn't know how to start a laptop. I actually had a panic attack when I opened this MacBook a few years ago. I am in the most loving, compassionate relationship that I could have never imagined for myself. And whenever I opened the MacBook, my partner was like, you're gonna have a panic attack. Like she was like, oh, she's doing it. Oh, she's crying. Like, so it's like I had to really learn how to do it all and overcome, those fears and limiting beliefs. And the podcast is something I believe in because I believe in stories like you do. I don't know how I found you, Karl, years ago, probably through Kyle Butler, because I've known Kyle a long
Most likely because he's pretty cool.
I think I've been friends with him and you for like definitely 5 years. And it's people in the wilderness. Like I remember hearing like not all who wander are lost and being like, hell yeah, that's the truth. Because yeah, like totally, like absolutely, like that's what it's all about. And I mean what I say when I say that what you guys do for people is really a big deal. And I think maybe you have an idea, but the web of reach within just being honest is really beautiful. And really fast before I say this, I went back to Orlando and I podcasted with a guy named Doug Hobby. It's so that podcast episode is so damn cool because he's the first, hold on, remember where I came from, right? Real conservative, like woo, real conservative, real white, like all the things. Doug was a history teacher. He was my first consistent customer when I was 19 years old. And he was the first white guy that wasn't a Republican that I had respect for. Which is just like, oh God, the ignorance. But I went back to Orlando and I podcasted with him. And, with 20 years on me and just understanding just how much he's gone through. And, he was in the car accident at 16 and his first thought, and then wanting to having big dreams and aspirations, like to be a college professor. But then he had, these twin boys that had special needs and that went on the back burner. Like you just hear people's stories and so JoBeth on the Journey has been fun, and I'm taking a little bit of a break because I want to continue having fun. And now I lost my train of thought, but I was going to say something else to you guys.
I was curious when you were talking about, you mentioned diet culture several times.
Mm-hmm.
What, I guess what is that, and how does it mingle itself with church and religion and things like that? Or does it? It may not.
Oh, it totally does. It totally does, because it's about control and shame. And it's about being an ideal version so you're worthy. And it's like, I kept thinking of like God-shaped hole today when I was thinking about what I was going to say to you guys, because you're taught like there's a God-shaped hole in you, and there's all, and then like you think about the girls that were acceptable in youth group, and the pretty ones were up there singing, and were you pretty enough, or all the things. And it's like I remember how my one of my best friends was treated when she didn't look the part, and it's like the control and the shame and the needing to be small is very much a part of it. And there's a whole lot of other factors, I think, there too, like just culturally, we're, my friend Nikki talks a lot about dying to the body, and like that like weird, conservative thing of like die to the flesh, and like, oh, but eat the flesh of Jesus, like all this. And it's like the cohesiveness of everything is really beautiful. I remembered what I was going to say, and it kind of ties into this, but it's mind, body, and spirit. It's like all of the things. So it's listening to that body. So like whenever I started to change my life, I was like, this deprivation is stupid. I ain't doing it no more. I'm going to feed myself well. Well, then I felt better, and then I just started to really understand how the body works. And you both said in a recent podcast that like, you're kinder, you got more peace. Whenever something is said to you, or like when that, like you just respond kinder. And I think the separation of body and shame and sexuality, I mean, I could go on and on about like how dysfunctional purity culture is. It is just not okay. And how much it harms men and women, like straight up. But I just think that like to hold all things together, mind, body, and spirit, and to listen to those cues, and it's very much part of it for me. And that's maybe something I'll continue to unpack. But oh yeah, take up space is what we're gonna do.
Yeah. So you mentioned Sabrina. Is Sabrina your partner?
Sabrina's my best friend,
Okay.
and she actually lives in the Carolinas too. So we're from a small town in North Florida.
Okay.
And she's a powerhouse of a person. Whenever we were in Orlando, a friend of ours, we were going to a very conservative Southern Baptist church in Orlando. So much so that our very first Wednesday in the college group, they did a labyrinth, right? Just like a walking prayer. We were upset. We were like, what kind of sorcery is this? We like called our pastor back home. Like they're doing some weird stuff up here or down here. And like we were that conservative. Sabrina didn't go to my bachelorette party because at the time she was in seminary after her degree in psychology. And she was like, I don't want it. You're doing the walk of shame in the morning. I don't want to know. You're drinking. You're drinking. I don't want to know. So like we were very conservative. And in Orlando, she's pivotal on the graph of my life, because even when we were so legalistic, so judgmental, we had each other to bounce off of for like encouragement and love and reflection. I tell her all the time that there is not a more gifted person with words to unwrap the mind and heart than her. So our friend comes out as gay, and in our friend group, I was pissed. I was confused. I mean, everybody knew it, for God's sake, before he did. But whenever he did, I just would not let it go. And we were driving in Orlando. Okay. Woo, so conservative. We literally would go to Family Christian Bookstore, listen to songs, because they used to let you use cassette tapes and CDs, because we used to sing in church together. We would cry in Family Christian. We're like driving, and she looks at me and she's like, who do you think you are? God's guard dog? I don't want to hear it anymore. He's gay. It ain't for you to judge. Let's move on. And I remember thinking like, yeah, I'm not God's guard dog. He's gay. Whatevs. And just like moving on. And there's been so many times when I had feelings for my friend and I did not know what to do with it. She knew my situation. She knew my relationship. She knew all the things about me intricately. And she said, you know what? I think you should get curious about it. And I said, all right. So it's like with her psychology degree and her biblical studies degree, I always tell my kids, I'm like, if you got a question, ask Aunt Sabrina. She'll just lay it out,
Yeah.
So she is a powerful force in my life. I would not be around without Sabrina. That's a fact.
Yeah. See, you label yourself as JoBeth on the journey, but I see a lot of different journeys in there, a lot of smaller journeys, and that kind of tie into the main path.
Mm-hmm.
And how has it paid off to just be open? You know, I mean, you were conservative, you dyed in the wool, you're white, and everything else. But it also seems that at times in your life you just said, I need to go where my intuition takes me. And it seems like early on you listened to your intuition, even though you still had a lot of baggage or whatever that you carried along with you.
Yeah, I mean, I got the vision of like a tree, like the tree of life, and I'm a lot of things. I know a lot about a lot of things. Like I really had to like get some bullet points today for you guys because I could really go in a lot of directions. And that's my superpower, really. Like I know that now. And how has it paid off? Well, it's definitely weeded out. Well, let me actually back up. I can pivot. I know I can. I get one life and I will be somebody like my Nana. I will. I think that I don't, my grandmother was like even just putting on this necklace today, this is her ring. And as I put it on, I thought about her and she's like, use your gifts, use what God gave you. So God gave her hands and she literally made like ornaments and window hangers out of church windows for like decades. And she would just do it. And it was her gift and use it. And like, as I put this on my neck, I thought, I got a voice. And any way you slice it, the fire has refined me. It gave me a whole lot of empathy. And so a mentor of mine asked me the other day, his name is Al Wall. And I wouldn't have met him had I not worked at that salon, by the way, that high volume salon. And we were talking about business. And he's like, well, how's your business coach said to pick a lane? I said, no, Al, because I can't pick a lane. So it's what it's going to be, but it's all going to be heart led. So the payoff at this point, I tell people, be boldly yourself. Be still with yourself. I love that you both hold space for just being here and being here now and feeling that in your body. Because the more you powerfully pivot in your own life, the more you will find your people. And the more the people that are not aligned for you, or maybe they have their own work to do, or maybe they need the healthy boundary that you're setting, they fall away, and that's okay. Part of the trauma of evangelical Christianity is thinking that you're one step away from doom. That's BS. And I think that in doing that, they serve you codependency and people pleasing. And then you're told that everything you do is bad all the time. And one of the things that I wrote down is I listened to a podcast from Audrey Assad. I want to say it was on the Liturgist podcast. This is probably in 2018. And it's the first time I had ever heard anybody say the word religious scrupulosity. I had never heard that before. And the way she described it is to step out of the hamster wheel. I had a feeling, which is a human feeling, right? But they deem it as sin. So then repent. So then you have the feeling again. So then you repent. You're just crap all around and you never have authentic connection. And it's worth it to do the work to feel your feelings because you're worthy of deeper connection with your family. Even today, seeing your picture after, I guess, you and your daughter or went to yoga. And I think I like posted something like, well, you can feel the energetic smiles because you can. And at the end of the day, I like me. I have to like me. And in my coaching today, we were talking about just energy. And my business coach was like, people will come up to her and say, I feel safe around you, right? And try to leech off her energy. And she's like, well, of course you do, because I feel safe inside of me.
Hmm.
And I think to feel safe inside of yourself is a very worthwhile journey to take.
Hmm.
Thankfully I've had my partner to be with me in some very dark times. Oh my goodness, very dark times. But she always reminds me, and Sabrina always reminds me, that I'm strong without them. I'm strong in my own skin. And I think just to take whatever avenue of the feeling inside of you and to not judge it all the time is so worth it.
We talk a lot about authenticity, which is a word that I heard you just use, and that journey of finding your authentic self, I think is, it's necessary. It's important. It is scary because, as you said, when you are becoming your authentic self, as I've found in my own life, you do have people that fall away. However, what you find that remains is that real connection that I think that you're talking about. Those are the people that are going to be with you through a lot of that stuff that you're talking about, that really hard stuff and the not so pretty stuff. And in the end, me personally, that's what I want. Because for so long in organized religion, in evangelical Christianity, it was, the things that you talked about, diet culture, changing my body, changing my thoughts, changing how I spoke, changing the pitch of my voice, changing, my makeup. I mean, every little thing I was changing for someone else. And so that was the hard part of deconstruction for me, because I had no idea who I was, and doing that hard work of figuring out, who am I at my core? It is a lot of hard work. And it can feel very isolating and very alone, which is why I'll speak for myself, love hearing stories, because it reminds you that you are not alone, that there are other people that are trying to do the same things that you are. They're trying to find their authentic self as well. So I appreciate that so much in your story, that, and it's not, I mean, for me, I don't know that I'll ever arrive. You know what I mean? I don't know that I'll ever arrive. I don't know that I'll ever stop deconstructing. And I've heard people say, well, when are you going to reconstruct something? And I'm like, I don't know. And I don't feel a rush to do so.
Right.
What is truth for me? I don't know that it's going to be the same as even what's truth for Karl. And that's okay. And that goes back to that respect that you and your partner have for each other. That can be said for Karl and I think that was one of the things that we really learned, especially early on in our deconstruction journey, is that we're not always in the same place, but we can still hold space for each other. And that's really huge.
Totally.
Yeah.
I appreciate the parts of your story that we relate to a lot, because podcasters, you start with exactly what you're talking about. This idea of, I'm on a journey. I want to share that with others. And in the beginning of deconstruction, like Laura just explained, you feel alone in the beginning because you don't know who you are. Through the stories and sharing and hearing the stories and all those, we become more authentic, like Laura explained. And
are you mansplaining now?
No,
Just kidding.
But I'm going to explain my side. I'm going to explain my side of it. My side of it was that then you get worried about followers, and you get worried about you know,
Mhm.
and
But then I feel like, are you being authentic?
no,
Right.
Because if
then
we
you're
are
not.
that, I mean, we've had lots and lots and lots of conversations, Karl and I, about this lately, just about the fact, like,
Mhm.
we need to do what is true to us. Otherwise, we are hustling for likes and
Mhm.
followers. And
Mhm.
that makes me tired just thinking
And
about it.
also you miss the things
Yeah.
like when JoBeth says, "Hey, you guys' stuff meant something to me," and
Yeah.
that's bigger than a lot of things. That something we did impacted you. Um, I know that Kyle Butler impacted you because he's one of the best people out there, and he's real low tech, and he doesn't worry about
Love it.
doesn't I don't know if he even has a website. He probably does, yeah, but
I love what I love about Kyle is just the permission to be a loving, powerful person.
mhm,
I think that's one of the things. To stay heart led is something I really want to do,
mm,
and just like you said, like if it's not authentic, it's going to feel like a straight jacket to me and I'm not going to have any fun. That's not
yeah,
how it's going to be.
yeah,
And Kyle is just a master class at seeing the good. And I am at a place where I want to see the humanity, there's a lot of people in those churches that are good people. They're really good people and they're really waking up to what loving other people looks like. And they really did. And they really do hear the soft sound of sandaled feet, which is what a pastor used to say. But there is so much that I learned in those days about mercy, about, that did do something to me. And so I think Kyle has just been such a cool person to watch who can be gracious and loving still, even though he's very bold.
mhm,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm.
There's so much in your story. It was like 20 little sermons there.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we weren't interrupting you or asking questions much
I was
because
like, am I talking too
we're
much?
just kind of
Yeah.
soaking
No.
it in. I like that heart led,
Mm-hmm.
and that's exactly what we're trying to do
Mm-hmm.
right now. I think is again, kind of taking inventory over the summer because we're together because
Mhm.
she's teaching 12 hours a day and so
Mhm.
on. But
Mm-hmm.
right now we have a lot of time together, and we're re-examining that again.
You
And
guys put warmth in the world,
Mm-hmm.
you
that
know?
means a lot to us to say that.
And there's those of us who miss community and were ousted from our communities. And, I think that's been really hard is like some of the most terrible things that have happened to me have come at the hands of Christians. And I mean, really, like
Mhm.
the people who wouldn't write witness questionnaires for me are people that saw me at church every Sunday with two little kids alone. It was my atheist friend. It was all these people who would be like, hell yeah, you're a great person. Let me write you a witness questionnaire. And it's like, we have seen some things and yet we saw some things too, and we miss the warmth. So I think like you both do it and you both do it in such a ripple that your earth mind can't comprehend, but the warmth is so felt and it's so needed for those of us who have been real dusty in the desert,
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
We have not just witnessed people come out from organized religion and thrive. We call it thriving in the desert.
Mhm.
Um, we've seen that, but we've also seen people drag a lot of their DNA with them
Mm-hmm.
from
Mhm.
evangelical Christianity. Um, and to me, it's all centered around this idea of a theologian. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings with the
Yes.
theologian, but also that idea of a theologian is I stand on a stage, you come somewhere and pay me.
Mm. Mm.
And it's amazing to me that we still drive to conferences,
Mm.
with the internet. But then you pay me and you probably volunteer for me,
Mm.
and then I
I
share
love,
my
yeah.
opinions of
Yeah.
I share my opinions
Yeah.
Next year, a new guy has a different take on my opinions, and you come see him.
Mm.
But I think when we get trapped in that kind of thing, even if we're just doing our podcasts and things like that, we can get trapped in that same thing of
Yeah.
it's about who comes to see me.
Mm.
Well, I think you totally said this in a podcast I listened to today, because that's very true. So like in my own life, I was like, well, don't swing the other way and become fundamentally a turd on the other side. Like you got to come back to the middle.
Mm.
So I think that's very true, but also too, like there are so many threads here because, as an entrepreneur, oh my goodness, I'll be unwrapping my money stuff or my worthiness for people to pay me for the services based off of the stuff I learned in those churches for 5 years for the rest of my life, probably. And that's okay because, we live in this world where there's an exchange of money. So like there's all these different conversations, but as you were talking, I think what is so true, like you have had some people on your podcast that are like literally coming together. So like, I would sign up to watch you guys speak, and that's because you're worthy of it and because I know you'll pull up seats for other people. So I think that's the difference is like as this stage is built or as people are coming together and just asking questions or holding space for certainty to not choke hold us all out of joy and connection. Like people are letting go, I really do believe, of certainty. And the people that are building connection can sit on a stage holding hands with other people. And that's what I see about you. That's what I see about Kyle. That's what I see about Jim. That's what I see about these people that are leading the way, not like a follow me, I'm so great, look at how rugged I am in the desert, but like truly, I know what it's like to be thirsty. And so I'm willing to take the time on a Friday night to talk to a single mom in the Carolinas to share her story. So I think that there's so much for us to unwrap as far as the fear we hold of what used to be the stage. It ain't the stage anymore because love is it, and love is a feeling. So I don't know if that like encouraged you, but I heard you say that on a podcast today. And I was like, that is very true to continue to like, shake off all those like weird, skanky webs of what we were in and still find the threads that run. But you both got warmth and heart and you put foot to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So reevaluating what that stage looks like. I think making room
Yeah.
for everyone.
Women especially, and people of color and queer people and all of those things. And
Really?
so what if that stage doesn't have room for me right now? That's exactly what we did with our conference last year. It was 100% women.
I love it.
Because at that specific time there wasn't room, and we did an opening or something like that. But I think you mentioned Jim. Is it Jim Palmer? Is that who you're talking about?
Yeah.
So Jim Palmer, David Hayward, there's some people like that have just stayed with their genuineness, their authenticity, and then there's others though. There's a bunch of them.
Oh yeah,
that have said, "I want to be David Hayward," and first of all, you got to have artistic ability, I guess, to be specific. But those guys have been out here a long time, also, and they stayed authentic. They stayed true to themselves, and so there's a lot of people that look to them. Which is still is okay. Yeah, that's fine.
I think that's okay to look to people, toward people, but to try to make myself that person, I lose my own authenticity that way. So I think that's what that's what we have to remember is that we all have something to contribute. Right. Definitely. I mean, if the table's big enough, we all have something to contribute, and I don't have to contribute in the same way JoBeth contributes, and I don't have to contribute the same way Karl contributes, because it's all important. It's all necessary. And I think that's where the mind shift needs to be, because I've been in that, like, oh, I wish I could be more like so and so, and and if I really am, then I lose myself again.
Right. I mean, I literally was talking about this today. I invested in a spiritual business coach, and it's the best money I've ever spent. It's money I quote unquote didn't have. And so, like, as I'm giving her these, like, what I should be doing, what a successful podcast should do, what this person does. And she was like, JoBeth, she's like, you're talking about contracts and stuff. She's like, here I am. For God's sake, I used to be an attorney. And she's like, I don't have a contract. I mean, you're here, you're paying it. So, like, stop overthinking it. And it's not easy, but, like, as you're talking, I kept, like, I always do this because it's like, there is this kind of moment. And I'm moving my shoulders, because you can't see this if you're listening. And it's like, you're just kind of in the vibe, in the flow. There is that for every person. And it's very different for every person.
Yeah.
That is how you find your flow. That is how you resonate. That's how you continue forward doing exactly what you're supposed to do here in your way.
That's right.
Yeah. I was listening to Derek Webb this morning on a different podcast, and I heard him talking about some of these kind of issues, but he kept saying that's not art, and that's not art, and that that's not art. If it's art you're trying to create, then I think that's what you're talking about. That comes from inside, and it comes from your flow. And it's more of letting out what's already there.
Totally. And, like, what art looks like to you.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
I think I remember where I was when Derek Webb came out with that song back in the day in the college ministry, and everybody was up in arms about it. Right? Woo, so provocative. And it's like that's exactly the cool thing, is to watch people continue to ask what's possible. Or why, or why does this hurt your feelings? Or, if you want to be technical, Jesus wearing a dress. I don't know. Like, it's like, why? And I think Derek is a great example of just, like, what is art mean to you? Art is now.
Yeah. Right.
The trouble with Karl is Karl eventually asks, well, do we need theologians at all? It's questions like that. And then some people who are those people don't.
Because we got to ping pong, Karl. We got to ping pong some things. So, yeah.
JoBeth, we always ask this question to everybody, and we never prepare them for it, but it's called the billboard question. So if you can put something on a billboard and the whole world would see it, what would that question be? Or no, wait, it's not a question. It's whatever
what would you put on
what
your
would you
billboard?
put on it? It could be a question. You can be as long or as short as you want.
It would be, what comes to mind is why. And I always tell my kids that love is the most important word. The second word that is the most important is curiosity. So it's always okay to get curious. And a lot of that has to do with contemplation. And I'm brave enough, they're brave enough, you guys are definitely brave enough to sit in that stillness that just asks why. And then from that question, you can follow that.
I think that's such great advice. I'm using air quotes. I don't know if you'd call it advice, but that's something we talk about a lot, is that critical thinking, right? And if you're asking why, you have to critically think things instead of somebody just telling you what you should believe, think. Yeah.
I'm currently protesting a book ban. So, in a school near here, they're trying to remove 10 books from the school libraries. And so I started reading them. Right. And so, forgot what point I was trying to make.
Critical thinking.
Yeah, critical thinking. Because what I end up saying to people like that usually is instead of teaching your children what to think, why don't you teach them to think? Teach them to evaluate literature.
Yeah.
And in the process, the first 3 books that I've read out of those banned books, they're phenomenal books.
Right.
Got a little slice of real life in there that people don't like. It was something that was a little too queer or was a little too teenage. It was real life for a teenager, but they don't want to.
Right. And the question is like, why? Why does that? What does that stir up in you? Does that, the kid at this point, the kids are like, we know, like whenever I talk about certain things, but it's like, to understand that like our history, right? So if you look up our family tree here in the Carolinas, our ancestors had some slaves. So it's like, that was weird and awkward for my dad to read. And I'm like, Dad, say it. It's the truth. So it's like, why does that make us feel uncomfortable? Because we have to acknowledge it, to take off the shame. I mean, I'm 2 seconds away from wrapping my vehicle in Brene Brown quotes. But it's like, just like, why to keep people blinded? That's why we take the books away. No, we can sit and we can ask the question why in a loving way,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this has been a really wonderful conversation, and we've really enjoyed getting to know you. But where can people find you? How you're involved in so many things. And so, like, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they want to chat with you, or if you have any websites that you want people to know about where they can learn more about you?
Yeah, totally. So my podcast is on a break right now. I'll be back in the fall, but the best place to reach me is on Instagram at JoBeth on the Journey. I also have a website, JoBethOnTheJourney.com, where you can see my past interviews. I'm where you listen to podcasts, JoBeth on the Journey. And that's where you can kind of see a little bit of everything is on my Instagram. The fitness, the movement part, and the hairdressing part is kind of woven into that.
Okay. Awesome.
Great.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
You so much
for guys all day.
Yeah. We'll have to have some other times where we can visit together. But I know you and I are now Facebook friends, and you said you're Facebook friends with Karl. So hopefully we can keep the conversation going.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for what you do.
You bet. For the listeners out there, we thank you for tuning in. Don't forget Evolving from Religious Trauma. I just have to look at Laura. I can't remember the title for some reason, but it's out there and it's cheap. And we're giving copies away. We want to know if you can't afford it and you want it. We'll find a way to make that available to you. So be where you are, be who you are, and be at peace.
Thank you for joining us today on the Desert Sanctuary podcast.
Remember, all who wander in the desert are not lost.
We believe all of our stories are sacred.
We are always here if you need someone to hear your story.
Check out our blog on Pathos and also our YouTube channel.
And stay tuned for our Leaning Forward conference.
Remember, we love you.
And be at peace.